Hi, I'm Leanne Ely. I'm a nutritionist, a New York Times best-selling author, and some people even say I'm a life coach. I started the Daily Dish Show to share my story, my truth, and my journey to vibrancy, and to inspire others to do the same. Because it's all about grit, perseverance, and finding a way despite the odds. It's about embracing the whole woman, not just the parts that are easy to love, and feeding her heart, mind, body, and soul. But I found that this isn't just my story, it's your story too. It's go time. This is the Daily Dish. So, here we go. You ready? The truth is about change. Sometimes it is unwanted. True that? Anyone ever experienced an unwanted change in their lives? I know I certainly have. Viktor Frankl said this. You know who Viktor Frankl is, right? He actually survived the Nazi Auschwitz. He was in Auschwitz. He survived, and he came out of it a completely different person with a completely different perspective. So when he says any of his quotes, put extra weight on them, because this is a man who survived and lived through terror, absolute abject terror. Hi, Corliss. He says, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. In the context of Auschwitz, what does that say to you? We are challenged to change ourselves, aren't we? We are, because when we have an unwanted change, it's an uninvited change. It's something we didn't sign up for. And, many times the change, or even the changes that we're facing, never in a million years is that something that we want. Never in a million years. But yet here it is, and it's something that we are having to deal with. So sometimes it's facing a loved one's illness, or your own even. I know Joanne, I often speak about Joanne and the selfless work that she's doing to love her father up as he's going through, his illness. And an elderly parent, a lot of us have done that. I've done that with my mother, and a lot of you have done that with your parent. You know what I'm talking about when you say an unwanted change. I had a girlfriend of mine whose mother just passed, who had Alzheimer's, and boy, years and years and years. She was the baby of the family. Her eldest sister, who was a friend of mine as well, passed away from brain cancer, and her mother didn't even know, because of Alzheimer's. Can you imagine? And then her father later passed a couple of years ago, and finally now her mother has passed. They're in Canada, and just the loveliest of families. I absolutely adored them growing up, and we only heard good stories about them. We even called them aunt and uncle because they were so close to our family. And I know the tragedy that Alzheimer's brings, and the tragedy of all that long-term care. But that was an unwanted challenge in their family. Death is an unwanted challenge and an unwanted change in your family, when you have to redefine yourself as who you are if you lose a spouse. My friend Christina Rasmussen, who wrote the book Second First, by the way, anybody who's a widow or has been through a real tragic divorce, or sad divorce or whatever, but any kind of a change, dramatic change like that, I highly recommend her book, because it helps you learn how to grieve in a way that's going to help you with your current life. And she doesn't diminish grief and say, get over it. She understands and holds place for it. That's what I love about her book. And I strongly recommend it to everyone. It's an amazing book. A divorce or a breakup is kind of a tiny death, isn't it? Because it changes everything up. An unplanned pregnancy, that could be like, oh my gosh, I had a girlfriend, she turned 40 and found out she was pregnant with her third child, not expecting it. It changed everything, and it changed all of her, this is many years ago, it changed the whole way that she did everything, including, they were building a house and they changed that up as well. Or infertility, that changes things up as well, doesn't it? You either cope with not having children, you adopt, or you do something, but everything, that's an unwanted change. It's an unwanted change. And how about a pandemic? Anyone? Pinkies up on that one. Nancy, the name of Nancy, you would love this book. It's called Second First. Second First. She's been a widow for 21 years. But when you have a good marriage and a good partner, that loss is grave and profound. Even 21 years later, right? You don't get over someone. You don't get over your grief. My girlfriend who lost her little girl, 12 years old. I've told you that story, coming across the room and fell into her mother's arms and died. She had some kind of a heart, it's a prolapse, prolapse. I don't even know what it is. But you understand what I'm saying, right? Nobody is prepared for that kind of unwanted change. No one is. So what do we do when we get it? Well, I will just say this. We've all been in places where maybe less dramatic, where you're in a traffic jam suddenly. Can you control the traffic? You cannot. You're at an outdoor wedding. I was at an outdoor wedding and it started raining and just ruined everything. The bride's beautiful dress was just drenched in mud and what have you. Can you control that? No. And poor woman, she's just sitting there broken down in tears. I get it. Her idyllic, beautiful wedding destroyed with a thunderstorm. And the past is something we can't control. You know that, right? The future somewhat, but somehow or whatever, we can also have we can have a say in so. Other people's minds, we have no way to change their minds. We can't manipulate. We are not God. This is beyond control. But the big stuff we're talking about, though, leaves us with these feelings of helplessness and out of control and even very unprepared. How do you prepare? It's like, and I'll use, again, I will say this, Nancy, who had an excellent marriage and had lost her husband 21 years ago, she didn't take classes to become a widow. She learned along the way how to live without him, unfortunately. And I'm sure there was a lot of ups and downs, and there are probably still times where she cries. How can you not? We celebrate. I mean, in today's day and age where there's so much negativity and everything, you look back and you can see this beautiful marriage. Good grief, of course. Of course you celebrate that. But we're all affected in different ways. That's just the whole thing. And when we have a change afoot that's come, an unwelcome change afoot, it affects us. Heart, mind, body, and soul. All the way around the block. So there are 5 things that we can control, and that's the things that we're going to be talking about today. Because you cannot control the event itself, but there are 5 things that are within your own control. We're going to be talking about that. I'm also going to be talking about some things that you want to, some tactics to use, because there's always an answer, isn't there? We find a way, don't we? We Diana and I our way through things. That doesn't mean it's without pain. That doesn't mean that it's not without searing pain even. It just means that we understand that there are solutions if we seek them. That's it. There are always solutions if we seek them. And we're also going to talk about, this is the biggie that I want to talk about, the difference between venting and complaining. Because I believe that there's 2 different ways of going about this. And we're going to talk about what that's all about, because I think this is absolutely critical. Okay? So here's 5 things that you can control. Keep this in mind as we're going through the subject matter. 1 is your attitudes. Your attitude, you have control over that. No one else does, unless you hand the keys to your car over to someone else. And even so, ultimately, you can turn it off and on. Your attitude is yours, no one else's. Your thoughts, your resolve, all of that belong to you. Yes, you can control them. No, you're not being pushed and pulled so that you're just completely out of control. No one is. No one is. We do have the ability to control things. Number 2 is your effort to do your best. You can always do your best. Now, when Elizabeth, oh gosh, of course I'm thinking, why can't I think of her last name? You remember she was the Ecuadorian missionary, Elizabeth Elliot. When she was in Ecuador, her husband got speared to death by, the misunderstanding, thinking he was some kind of a, creepy god or something, somebody who had to be killed. And she stayed with her little 18-month-old daughter at the time and kept going through. And they asked her, how did you manage all of this in a strange land and she was doing translations and working all of this, doing all this, amazing work. She said, I did the next thing. She just did the next thing, because sometimes routine is the absolute panacea to raging, searing pain. The fact that you have to do something, the fact that the dog needs to be fed and walked is a gift. So that is, I think, important, your effort to do your very best. Number 3 is your actions to stay loving. Sometimes in the midst of pain and in the midst of unwanted change, we don't want to be loving. We just want to be to ourselves, and we want to cocoon in, and everybody stay away. We can still be loving, and we can still cocoon in a little bit if we need to, if that's our process mode or whatever. But it doesn't mean that we need to be rude and we need to push away and we need to scream at people and all of that. We can still contain our feelings enough to be loving. And our reactions, how do we meet these new things that we don't want? How do we meet them? Oftentimes it's with shock. Oftentimes it's with, I don't even know what to do. And you feel completely dumbfounded, confounded. What am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? I have no idea where to go next. But your reaction and staying calm and staying, of course, you're going to have whatever your reaction is, you're going to have that reaction. You don't need to live in it. You can also bring it back and just recognize and realize that, yes, you are going to need time and space to process stuff, but sometimes we don't have the luxury of doing that. If somebody shows up, if you are suddenly dealing with somebody who's ill, I didn't have the time to really process moving my mother across country and taking care of her. It was like, that had to be. She was in trouble, I looked at everything. I talked about everything. I did what I needed to do, but she was in trouble. She was in trouble. She needed someone caring for her. Who's going to do it? What did she want? How could we do this? And you have to shift carefully. And what I kept looking at, and it saved my bacon from losing it, because I was scared. I was fearful even. Like, what is this going to look like? How's this going to impact her and impact me? And what's this going to look like? And all of it. There's a lot of questions that I had, a lot of unanswered stuff, but I knew I couldn't leave her how she was. Someone needed to take care of her, And I knew she wanted to be with me too. I knew that's what it was, that she wanted to be with me. So I became solution oriented. I didn't look at the problem and just say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. She's just going to have to stay here. We'll just have to get some kind of a caregiver and then to take care of her. And abandon my mother? Are you kidding me? But when the time she needed me most, I was there for her. And I didn't know what it was going to look like. And it scared the living daylights out of me. But I did it anyway. And so do you, because that's what loving, wise women do. We step up in a time of need. And especially when it's somebody like your elderly parent. It's your time to change their diapers sometimes. But yesterday, if you recall, we talked about the whole, the wisdom of patience. Because in the process of change, it's the only thing that undergirds all of this, all of this problem. It's the only thing. Patience is super helpful when you're trying to lose weight. Patience is super helpful when you're trying to take care of an elderly parent. Super helpful if you're trying to wait for an adopted baby to come to your house, or whatever else it is that is on your plate. We all have the opportunity to sit at the feet of wisdom and to contemplate what's next and pray about it and pursue wisdom as we contemplate the change. And, and I will say this again, because, sometimes it's an abrupt change. It's abrupt, and you don't have the time to sit and process it. I couldn't say to my mom, hey, Sit tight for a month. I'll be back after I process this. And it just wasn't there. I had to go bump, 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 and make my, go through the whole thing. And that's why being solution oriented saved a lot of time, really. And I did have some times where it was just like, what have I gotten myself into? This is too much. How am I going to process this? And it did, end up being too much. And I did have to end up moving her to a full-time care facility because she just, I couldn't do it all. But the point was that wasn't what I needed to be looking at the time. I needed to be looking at, what does my mother need right here, right now, today? And that's what prompted me and took me to the next thing and to the next thing. I did the next right thing, just like Elizabeth Elliot said. So what do we do? Hi, Mary. What do? Number one, we have to accept it. You don't have a choice. This isn't multiple choice living here. It's come your way. It's on your plate. Now, what are you going to do with it? You can't say, well, if only this didn't happen, if only my mom didn't smoke, this wouldn't be happening. Or I can't handle this whole thing because, I've got a life to live too. Do we do that? Of course not. We step up, we accept it. And we also accept the fact that our feelings, our processing, our whatever needs to be put maybe on a side burner. I still had a lot of stuff that I had to process. And believe me, I talked to a professional about it. It's just like, this is a lot. What? This is, I don't know what I'm going to do. You don't have the luxury, though, of telling somebody who's in a crisis to just hold it while I get my act together, But there is room for your process as long as you understand, what, I can go through all of this and maybe I'll have a little meltdown later, but it's okay. Because what's the most important thing here is that we're in the midst of an unwanted change and we're moving on it. We're taking action on it because we're called to this. So number two is support. Support. I'll tell you what, without support, you can't get anything done. We need to have that support. And you can complain about the people who are not supporting. Maybe you've got siblings who aren't stepping up to the plate. My sister-in-law, I will tell you, I couldn't have done it without her. And she was cross country. She flew out to help. She flew out to take care of my mom. I had a bunch of travel going on. I had a bunch of things going on and all kinds of stuff. And she was there. I missed a big book signing. I missed a bunch of stuff because of all the stuff that I was doing. And then finally I just said, Maritza, I need you. She was there. She was there. We need support. And we don't get support unless we ask, by the way. And if we don't get asked, if we don't get the support that we want, we can sit and complain about the sibling that's not helping, or we can keep going until we get someone, because we don't have time to play when you're in this place of unwelcome change. I always say too, we are not alone, and in our DNA, we need to connect with others. We need our tribe. We need our people. That's just truth right there. And if you have a body clutter buddy, bless you, smart, Lizzie and Jen, good grief. They've gone onto each other. They've supported each other through thick and thin. And it helps. It helps. You don't feel so alone. Someone with skin on saying you're okay. And, that's what we have with our body, with our community and our hot melt sprint group. It helps all the time. It helps. But we also need sometimes number three is someone who can just sit with us and just listen. Now, let me just talk about it. My friend, Rhonda Britton, and if you were there on Saturday, you heard we talked a little bit about this, and she says complaining advertises your fears. And I mean, when we're in an unwanted change, don't we get a lot of fear? Like, what's going to happen? How's this going to affect me? How's this going to affect them? What if? Lots of questions, lots of catastrophizing, and sometimes, necessarily, if we're to see what's going to be next. But I think we need to look at something beyond that. And that is understanding the difference between complaining and venting. Okay? Now, this is critical. This is critical because there is a difference. We can't complain our way into solution, but we can vent to let off the steam and the pressure because it's emotions. It's different. Let me ask you this. Pinky's up, right, Lizzie? Good. Yay. Amen. But okay, so when anybody here use an Instapot for making their bone broth? If you have the valve changed all the way over to let the steam out, the whole time you'll never get the pressure on, right? And it'll never cook. It'll never create what you want. But the pressure valve, when you turn it on, it lets the steam out. And we all need that at times. So my friend Rhonda, again, I told you I just love her to death. She's got some good ideas for venting, because if we get stuck in the place of being just being a complainer, like you wouldn't believe what happened, and yop, and then he, and then she, blah, 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 blah. And doesn't do much. And it's not, oh, I'm just letting off steam. It's not. You're letting off a bunch of complaints, a string of complaints. But venting's different. And there's a way to do it in a way that's constructive and a way that's helpful. You ready for this? I've got 9 things. This is all from Rhonda. 1 is to pick a venting partner who you consider to be supportive and trustworthy. Trustworthy is important because this doesn't need to get out into the community. This is your private matter that you want to talk about. Remember, we're allowing for our emotions and we're letting our emotions go. This is how I feel. This is what's going on. Number 2, explain that you want to vent and ask if they're available to support you, right? Bingo. Number 3, establish a mutually agreed upon time and a time limit for the session, because danger, danger, this could turn into a complaining session. And you want to vent. You want to be very set on your emotion and allowing it to go. I'm overwhelmed. I'm upset. I don't know what's next. Those kind of things. That's not complaining. That's just a reality of this new thing that you're having to deal with. And then you clarify what you want your venting partner to do. So a lot of times it's just, you just need to talk. You don't need them to interject and stop you and say, oh, wait, I know what you should do here. This is my advice. Oh, I know. This is my, and let me sidebar this. One of my complaints is having somebody say, oh, I know exactly what you mean. When my mom, blah, blah, blah. It was interesting when my mom passed. I had a lot of people telling me about their stories about their mom's passing or their parent passing. I just went through that. And then this big long paragraph about their whole thing. It doesn't feel like it was about me. At that moment, I needed it to be about me and my grief, not theirs. You hear me? We don't need to compare our stories. We just need to say, I am so sorry. I'm praying for you. I love you, and support and encourage. And then later, a couple of weeks later, maybe offer, this book really helped me. Or if there's anything I can do, when I was going through this with my mom, this was something that helped me. That's how we layer it in so that we can be supportive and kind. But remember, when somebody has gone through something, unless they're asking for the story, a lot of times what they're just saying is just, here I am and I'm raw and I'm beat. I've just been through something tragic and awful. The other thing is, you don't want opinions, you don't want advice, or maybe you do, or maybe say, I just need to say this and then maybe come back. You want somebody who's going to hear you, not waiting for you to take a breath so they can interject their stuff, And also what you're saying, to keep absolutely 100% confidential. This is your rawness that you're sharing. This is the stuff, this is your bleeding heart that you're sharing. And this is a sacred duty of this venting partner to keep it very, very confidential, not share it with another living soul, just you. And you also don't want them emoting with you. I remember a girlfriend of mine who, this is a mistake I made, and this is what I'm going to confess to, who was telling me about this jerk of a husband, and he's so awful. He's this blah, 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 blah. Oh, leave that jerk, get rid of him, dump him, and he was. I mean, He was abusive. He couldn't keep a job. It was like, hey, I've heard this story before. I might have lived it. And, she got back together. She got back together with him. And after I said all of that stuff, button your lip and just be there for the venting process. And then the other thing is, if you need any other support, like, do you need them to express empathy to you? Tell them, this is what I need from, I just need to hear it. I feel you. This must be really hard. Empathy isn't get over it, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Well, this is all in God's plan. When you start slapping Bible verses on stuff, I'd slap you right upside your head. Stop it. God's not going to give you anything you can't handle. Do you think that's empathetic and loving? Absolutely not. Don't use the word of God as a weapon. All right? Amen. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. All venting is an acknowledgement of your emotion around the unwanted change. That's what it is. This is an acknowledgement, and that's what venting is, versus complaining is advertising your fear. It's all about how it affects you and what it's all about. Have you noticed how it goes right back to you? And it puts you in the place of if only and living in the past and, well, nobody has it as hard as one-upsmanship. Well, you don't have it as hard as I did. What if Nancy, let me ask Nancy, because she's been a widow for 20. What if Nancy, if a new widow had said to you, well, you don't understand, you've been a widow for 21 years. Is that discounting your pain and your grief? Yes, it is. When we try to one-up one another with, well, you don't get it, well, you don't understand, well, you've never been in my place, well, there's no empathy there. There's no empathy or care or tender-heartedness there. We can't do that to one another. Or if we do, we're not loving. We are just plain zero not loving. How do we love one another? We walk alongside is how we do it. And walking alongside, sometimes that lip is just buttoned up shut. I'm just here for you. I see you, you're hurting, and I'm here. And oftentimes that's enough. The other thing is that we put into place a gratitude practice. For today, I'm thankful for hot coffee. I hardly slept last night, and here's this fabulous cup of coffee. At least I have this, sometimes we get down to, gosh, what can I be thankful for when I'm just completely overwhelmed with grief, or I'm completely overwhelmed with trying to figure out what I do next. Gratitude is it, and it helps. Solution-oriented, number 5, rather than problem-oriented, because with solutions, you can at least start to solve some of it. Not all of it, maybe, but some. You can come up to it and say, I can't make my mother better. Wouldn't you love that? I tried really hard, you guys. I Googled how to fix it, how to clean it. I talked to all of my wellness friends. I did everything I could. Everything. I organically cooked this, that, and the other thing. I gave her, it's time to do your breathing exercises, Mom, time to meditate, trying to do this. And then in between, running up and down the stairs to do my work. And it was a real time. And I remember just the ache in my heart was a constant. Knowing full well as hospice came in to take care of her, that I wasn't going to have her for very long. I knew what the reality of the situation was. And we do the best that we can with what we've got. That's all we can do. That's all we're called to do. But I just want you to see that there is power, and there are things that you can do, and that you are not held against your will against a wall, and it's just overwhelming, all consuming, and that's it. Not true. Even with unwanted change, you're better than that. You have resources, you have community, you have the wherewithal within. Check yourself at the door if you need to, and check how your heart is toward others and toward this situation. Your heart has to be open and tender, loving, connected. That's how we get to the place of solution. It's also how we get to the place of resolve. Because oftentimes with these unwanted changes, we can't change it. There's no changing somebody who's, been in a car accident and has lost a leg. You can't grow the leg back. You got to adapt new to what the truth is and what your new reality is. And that's where we all are. We all have a new reality. Sometimes change comes and we embrace it and we want it. And other times it's unwanted. But I will tell you this, wise women rely on and depend on patience, God, community, and a heart that knows the difference between all of it. Because that's how we get to the next level. And that's how we live in a way that's honoring to the one who made us. Because we're here on purpose and for purpose. And sometimes on purpose means, and for purpose means, is taking care of someone that we just don't know what to do with next. But we get through it, don't we? I hope that was helpful for you. I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. And I used something that I had to deal with. But you can look in your life. Do you have an unwanted change? Is there something there that you're just having a really hard time dealing with? You can do it. You can figure out the next steps. You can Diana Nyad your way through. I have complete confidence in you because you're a wise woman. So there. Pinky's up. Peace be with you. I so appreciate you all. Thanks so much for showing up. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for joining me today. You can find me on TikTok for daily tips to help support your most vibrant life. And remember, you are the author of your own story. Until next time.